I'm Jason Thornton. I'm the co-founder of Unshackled, a nonprofit in Salt Lake City that is working with individuals getting out of incarceration and addiction, and to help them find meaning in their lives. I remember when I must have been 13 or 14 in Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts. We went to a prison or a jail in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I remember going to the booking room, and more so that in that process of going to the booking room, there was an individual that was pacing back and forth. And he looked really angry, and I remember how terrified I was of this man who was larger than, just a large man for me. And he looked right at my eyes. And I'll never forget that fear that struck me of this monster behind bars. So we went through and did the fingerprinting and everything else. And the merit badge, I don't know if it was for civic engagement. Definitely wasn't for criminal justice reform, I doubt it. But it was a moment that carried with me for many years, because I just remembered thinking anyone who's involved with incarceration, whether they've been incarcerated or even if they were a guard, I was just terrified of what that meant, who that person was. It was about a decade later, a little over a decade, that I found myself pacing in a jail cell. Terrified of myself. Terrified maybe of what I've become. Ashamed of where I found myself. I think even more scared of what would be to come after release. From that experience, I grew a lot. One thing that I've learned in this process of being incarcerated is how that process dehumanizes not only the other to us, but ourselves to ourselves. And that may be hard to understand if you haven't been there. But I remember going into prison and wondering what person I would come out. Also wondering, who am I? Am I the guy who served a mission? Am I the guy who did all this volunteer work and was out in the community and just loved that feeling of serving others? Or was I the guy that committed my offense, and that was, to me, that shadow that was cast behind me, that fear of that unknown, of the side of me I never imagined? See, the cards for me were stacked in my favor, and I've met so many people that the cards were stacked against them. And there were parts of my life, like being raised in a single-parent home, being food insecure for a big portion of my life, growing up poor. Sure, those things would probably indicate that I was likely to be incarcerated at some point. But it wasn't by the color of my skin that would put 2 out of 3 black men in prison or jail at some point in their lives. So I had a favorable hand dealt me in my childhood. But being in prison, I didn't know who I was. And it wasn't thanks to the prison system. Don't get me wrong when I say I'm thankful for that experience of going to prison. The dehumanizing, the demoralizing aspect of being incarcerated, being ripped from those that you love, being ripped from the community that gives you support, is a very destructive force. And so I'm thankful to the city yogis who came in and helped me to identify that there is divine within me and with others. I'm thankful to the Christian volunteers who came in and just shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and said, "Thank you for having me in your home at a prison." And I was thankful for the books, the many books from Auschwitz, from people that talked about how to be a better person, self-improvement books. But more importantly, I'm thankful to God that I was given grace and mercy when I felt that I deserved it the least in my life. Out of that came my desire to work with people that are coming out of incarceration and this vision and dream that we've had for many years to form Unshackled. And in this process, we've learned the fear that people carry, not because they've been incarcerated, but as I've spoken to people in the community, I find they carry the shame of their uncles, their aunts, their distant cousins sometimes, and they come up to me with tears in their eyes and they say, "Thank you for taking a stand for my dad who was incarcerated since I was a kid." And that shame that just destroys families. And so through this process, I've learned, I think, 3 key principles that help us to identify our own humanity and also see the humanity in those that maybe we've demonized or dehumanized in our own minds. And the first one that helped me to kind of recollect myself and understand which Jason am I? Am I that person who makes mistakes or the person who does good? Was to acknowledge that being human, basically, being human means that we make mistakes. And we've all heard the phrase that failure is an event, not a person. Never did that mean more to me than coming out of prison. And to think that I'm not a failure, I've made mistakes, and this is my shadow. And now my shadow's on display for everyone to see. But am I okay with that, or am I going to try to hide it and run from it? So part of my key to sanity and happiness is to embrace my shadow and to find meaning in those things that I've struggled with, but to also identify and give myself credit for the things that I've overcome and how I was able to do that. And so that's an important part of what we want to focus on as well, is how we can work with people in prison to unshackle themselves from the shame, the fear they have of themselves as well. The other key point that I have come to learn in this process, both of being in prison and also establishing with some dear friends Unshackled, is that we all have the propensity to be saints or sinners. The Abrahamic story, or of all Abrahamic traditions, Jewish, Islam, and Christianity of Lucifer. He is a great example of an angel of glory, God's right-hand person. Forgive me if I misphrase things here, because I'm not a theologist, I'm not a preacher. But Lucifer fell from his greatness and became the most feared person in the Bible. So we see someone who has both that binary of good and evil. And we kid ourselves when we tell ourselves that we can't do what Mother Teresa did, or we can't do what Jeffrey Dahmer did. And we separate ourselves and we alienate and dehumanize that individual who's done something that is sheer evil without acknowledging that this is also a brother. This is someone who was a child, that at some point someone looked at them with love and saw the divine beauty in a child. So with that, it is so imperative to us, to all of us, to say, I can be great and I could do something atrocious, and not judge those who have been in a place that maybe their chemical balance was off, and maybe they made an awful decision that they've regretted the rest of their lives, but they're still people with the divine in them. A phrase that I learned before ever doing yoga, before doing the stretches on a mat, was namaste. And it's a common phrase. I think a lot of times we just say it and don't really think about it. That phrase was a saving grace to me to think about while I was incarcerated. The fact that we, in saying that and bowing to the other, we are saying, I acknowledge the divine piece of you that also dwells within me. And as we embark on a quest to love others and to be community and create community where it's a community of kinship and mercy, as opposed to a community of rigid rules and unforgiveness, we find the importance of bowing to those who we may be fearful of and saying there is divine within you as well. And so that is a very important key to embracing those in that process of getting out of incarceration as well to me. Thirdly, one of the most important parts of the process of both my my rebirth in life, my connecting with people through prison ministry and going to talk to people while they're incarcerated, is just to see that on the spectrum of good and bad, we can't get to that place of being great, to that self-actualization moment, until we address all of our demons that keep us behind. So maybe that's where our nonprofit, Unshackled, I mean, that's what that really means to us, is that it's not just about people getting out of prison one day, but finding freedom from within prison walls, being okay with who you are, and accepting maybe those evil things that you've done, but not letting that define who you are. We're all greater than the worst thing that we've done. Everybody. You know, I don't walk around thinking I'm a liar because I told a lie. We've all told lies. And so our identities oftentimes can be confusing. But all of us have the opportunity to decide, what's my identity? What is going to define me, and what are the guardrails that I live my life by? Is it that I'm a felon, or is it that I'm a father? Is it that I'm a salesperson, or is it that I'm a human being that wants community with others so that I can also love myself? So the degree to which we can go into a prison, we can meet with the homeless, we can meet with someone of another faith or another tradition that we don't understand, and embrace them, either literally with a hug or to see them where they're at, we find freedom from ourselves within ourselves. Thank you.